Next, I want to introduce Catlin Pace. Catlin was the first woman skipper, am I right? Well, for hundreds of years. And is a great resource for me. I'm on the fishing committee, and I think almost all the documents, the amendments, etc., I go to Catlin and fishermen from around my coast and get wonderful help. But I think she has something very important to tell us about seeing ourselves again as an island nation.
Hello, you have to excuse me because I'm not used to speaking publicly. My name is Catlin, and I'm on the Executive Committee of the Irish Fishermen's Organisation. I could talk a lot, I suppose, about the fishing industry, and actually you may not know very much about it because it's probably not something you hear very much about. But as I would like, a few things I suppose I would like to do today is for us to try and remember as an island, and I suppose in this economic times maybe it's important for us to go back to our indigenous people and businesses, as Ray spoke about. The fishing industry is one of the few industries that is Irish. And when this industry closes, which it will do because of EU laws that do not protect fishermen nor fishing stocks. We live by the common fishery policy, which forces fishermen to dump an estimated €2 million worth of fish into the sea every year dead. This at a time when I actually brought in a bit of the Cork Examiner, when not just people around Ireland, around the world are dying, but there's people queuing for food. And we are forced to dump this fish. And if we don't, we get criminalised, we get brought to court, and we get fined. Prime fish, prime food, bestowed on us by nature, but thrown back into the sea, dead, to rot, pollute our waters, and if we refuse to do so, we are criminals. There can be nothing more offensive and morally wrong than to kill something that is perfectly good and throw it away while half the world starves. We own 24% of the most lucrative waters in Europe. We are allowed to catch as little as 4%. Now, in this time of, again, economic crisis, I think we really need to start going back to what will get us out of this crisis. The Dells and everybody else can pack their bags and sail back home. But we have to stay here. We don't have a choice. And in the 80s and further back when there was crisis in Ireland, we could export our people. We could export our young people because there was jobs maybe somewhere. They could take their shovel and go to London and build London, America and New York. But I can't send my kids away today. I don't want to, but they have nowhere to go. I have a job. I'm Irish. I have an industry and I want to be protected. There's only us, the Irish people, the ordinary people of this country that can make changes. Because governments don't do it. They never did, and they never will. Not without ordinary people pushing for change. When Rosa Parks sat on a bus 40 years ago, she was the first vote for an American black president. We have given away up to 200 billion worth of fish. No, we didn't give away. It was taken from us by the huge, big fleets of Europe and Spain. Spain has more fishing boats than almost the rest of Europe put together. Every year they bring in new papers and they bring in new this and they talk about conservation and preservation and they don't mean any of it. What they mean is more for the big powers of Europe. In these times, we have to look into ourselves as an island. We're not an island people, and we are an island people because the sea is hugely important to us. It surrounds us. The song says, thank God we're surrounded by waters, but we will have very little left in these waters. Actually, I got something which is of interest from a guy in Scotland recently, yesterday actually. Because there's a lot in the news at the moment about the piracy in Somalia. Now, Somalia is one of the poorest countries in the world. They have no government. Now, let me just tell you what this says, not justifying any of that piracy at all. It says that up to 300 people died. And they couldn't figure out why they were getting all these sicknesses and illnesses until after the tsunami in 2005, when hundreds of barrels were washed up on the shore. People began to suffer from radiation sickness, and more than 300 died. They discovered that most of it was chemically dumped stuff from hospitals around Europe. At the same time, the European ships that have been looting Somalia's seas for their greatest resource, seafood, they have destroyed our fishing stocks by overexploitation. They have destroyed their own, and now they move on to take ours. More than 300 billion worth of tuna, shrimp, lobster, and other sea life is stolen by vast trawlers illegally sailing into Somalia unprotected seas because there's no one to protect them. This is taken every year. It has left the Somalians with nothing, and I am not justifying for a second, but we reap what we sow. And we do this all the time in the West, and this is just one of the things that's happening at the moment while the British Navy is sailing to our Somali coast. Let's understand where it came from. I could talk a long time about the fishing industry, but let me just talk about our history as an island nation. Because I meet TDs and politicians, the very first thing they say to me is, but we had no tradition. How dare they? I grew up in a fishing family. My father fished, my grandfather fished, I fished, every one of us did. And I remember going down, being taken to the pier by my father to meet a very famous guy that was coming to sell us the common market because it was going to give us so much more for our fisheries. And we had a good life because I was brought up in a household that went because of fisheries. And that person was Jack Lynch. And he asked my father to sell the whole fishing common market to the fishermen of Helvig because we would have better markets. We have no markets. Today we have lost 200 billion worth of Irish fish from our waters. It's discriminately taken. We have, I will tell you about Shane, a friend of mine from Dunmore, who's a 10-metre fishing boat. He had to leave his grounds a month ago when he was fishing cod because he had his 1 ton of cod caught. Alongside him were French boats that had 10 tonne a day. They're allowed to take 7 to 8 times more fish from our waters. And when I talk about the 200 billion legally taken, that's what's written down legally because there is no control. We have no idea what's been taken. And unless we put a stop, and the only way forward is to not change the common fishery policy, but to scrap it. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 35 years, and it works not even for the big companies because it's a disgrace to dump fish into the sea. There has to be a better way. And the better way is to go back to what we did down through our centuries. Because what we did down through our centuries when we had a huge tradition as an island fishing nation, we controlled it. We controlled it. We gave it to Europe. We imported. Cork was a great import of wine from France. And when the boats came in, they brought in the wine, they unloaded it, and they took Irish men on board, who then went and fished off the shore. So we traded that way, and we knew what they were taking, and we knew what we were getting. Off Arklow, our fishermen went as far as Shetlands to fish. And again, we traded from my own place, from Youghal and Dungarvan, and Dunmore East to England, where we brought back salt, where we learned to salt and our fish. We had Baltimore out the road, was a notorious school, and it took young boys in to teach them the trade of fishing and seamanship and net making and everything else that went with it. Our traditions are huge, and we have to go back as an island people to understanding this. We actually have fishermen that went as far as Newfoundland to fish 50 years before Columbus found his way across the Atlantic. So we have a huge tradition. So when people and TDs talk to me about not having a tradition, how dare they? We had a huge tradition of